put off by how long this video is, don't worry, I try to jam-pack my videos with as much content and as much detail as I possibly can. Anything I feel I can comment on and that I feel you might be interested in, I pretty much put in the video. I try not to repeat myself and talk fairly fast.
Downfall, originally titled Der Untergang. Movie review. Plot. The final days of Hitler and his closest friends and allies in the Führer bunker. On plot. I had written a series of notes for this, but I decided to use them all for the thoughts section. I don't really want to give away very much of this movie. If you can sympathize with Hitler from watching this movie, I do not understand you. He makes it clear that he doesn't think he is at fault when he clearly is. He says the German people, all of them, deserve to die for what he won't admit is his mistake. I guess you can admire his passion, the passion he inspires in other people. But if you don't realize this is a tragedy about mistakes made by poor leadership that refuse to let go of their evil ideas, you're not paying attention. And this movie and the YouTube parodies of scenes of it, which I will not otherwise talk about in this, since this is going to be a very serious review, do not promote Nazism. I wish I didn't have to say that, but rather they seek to fight it with honesty and humor, respectively. Now, in this we see Hitler as he was by the end, a sad, frail old man losing his psyche and body to disease. We don't feel for him, but we do realize that he wasn't some inhuman monster. He was human, a human who chose to do awful things for wrong reasons, reminding us that other humans can make that choice, and we have to watch out for that. And we also feel some relief that even such powerful people who use their power to do such unspeakable evil end as frail, useless husks of the people they used to be, if they live long enough for that to happen. And no, I had already planned to cover this film before all the recent mainstream Nazi apologism. I decided to do this way back when I started to do these, you know, mostly World War II anti-war movies, and I forget what I started with, but I think I did count that this was the 6th in the series, the unofficial series. Now this movie is 2 hours and 29 minutes long, or 2 hours and 23 minutes without end credits. It is a long sit, and it is a movie that you're not going to... It doesn't particularly offer relief. The ending, the very ending, offers relief. And it doesn't start in this very dreary setting of the Führer bunker, but we don't get very much relief. Not at the very start, not at the very end. Excuse me. The relief comes in, you know, getting up out of the seat after watching it and, you know, letting in some sunlight and just starting to process it when no longer surrounded by the crumbling Third Reich. Now, from Wikipedia, the film was based upon the books Inside Hitler's Bunker, The Last Days of the Third Reich, by historian Joachim Fest, Until the Final Hour, Hitler's Last Secretary, The Memoirs of Theodor Junge, one of Hitler's secretaries, co-written with Melissa Mueller, Inside the Third Reich, first published in German in 1969, The Memoirs of Albert Speer, one of the highest-ranking Nazi officials to survive both the war and the Nuremberg trials, Hitler's Last Days, an eyewitness account, first English translation 1973 by Gerhard Bolt. Okay, I'm gonna butcher this. You know, I will be trying to do my best with these German names. I am, you know, Western European myself, but okay. Das Notlazarett unter der Reichskanzlei. Ein Arzt erlebt Hitlers Ende in Berlin by Dr. Ernst Günther Schenk, and Soldat, Reflections of a German Soldier. I should maybe have gotten like the English translation for that. I forgot to. I did read all of these notes before starting this review, but yeah, that might have been. So I apologize for that. Yeah, which was Siegfried Knappe's memoir. And I did not read any of these books. It seemed much too involved for me. And from IMDb trivia, during the premiere in Germany, a large part of the audience broke down in tears at the end. Every person remained seated until the last of the credits were shown and the lights remained dimmed. And more IMDb trivia, most of the outdoor city scenes for the movie were filmed in St. Petersburg, Russia, which is ironic. This was for two reasons. One, the architecture of the city has many Germanic aspects, and second, there are plenty of streets with little or no modern advertisements and other commercial aspects. And I suppose, yeah, IMDb lists, you know, a number of goofs, including genuine, like, you know, things where we know, okay, that didn't happen the way it's shown in the movie, which, you know, I don't think that the other ones are necessarily so particularly interesting in this kind of movie, but those are obviously important. Yeah, I'm not going to go into them here. You know, you can look them up. They are an interesting read. I did read all of them. And yeah, the bunker is claustrophobic, and every so often we do see the outside world. And, you know, with that kind of thing, it's all, you know, it brings up, was this a wise decision? And I do think ultimately that it was. You know, without it, it would, the movie would be smothering in the tight confines and the sheer just even as he is falling apart, both, you know, not quite literally physically, but physically and emotionally, and, you know, he's seeing his ideas be, you know, he eventually realizes that this is the end. He is not going to see his ideas realized past what he has gotten. Even with that, Hitler's such a... he was not some mythical monster, but his opinions and the way he behaved toward people, perhaps not despite of, but especially when contrasted with how gentle he could be with his secretary and his dog, is just, yeah, sickening. And the movie needed a little bit of just outside, and it never leaves Berlin. It never goes very far geographically away from the bunker. Well, at the very start, I forget exactly if that is the is that the bunker as well? And anyway, and it's not as though there are, you know, some of the officers question Hitler's orders almost exclusively behind his back and such, but we don't. One of the things we keep checking in on this group of Hitler Youth, and excuse me, it's a little cold, hence I still have a little, yeah, throat. This group of teenagers, including this you know, a girl, which is of course not to say that women can't be soldiers, but she doesn't even look like, you know, I mean, if she wasn't, if you didn't know, if you saw like an image of her in this movie and you didn't know that it was from this movie, and or you know, you didn't know that Hitler Youth was a thing, you would probably think that it was like, you know, some kind of silly prank, like playing pretend, someone who was too young to understand the seriousness of Hitler, and who was just, you know, putting on a uniform. Yeah, it's you know, children, mere children, and you know, I'm not saying, you know, not saying anything against children, but children should never be near war. And there they are, you know, defiantly defending while Hitler is inside, saying that his people deserve to die, and refusing to admit that it was his own mistakes. That's one of them. Another is this doctor who wants to take care of, you know, the sick and wounded, and also is very concerned with evacuation of the city of Berlin. And so we never actually leave the horrors of the war, or the horrors that Hitler was directly responsible for the 2-hour 23-minute duration. And it's also, I mean, honestly, some people might want to watch the whole movie, but might need to watch it in like segments, not sitting down and watching the whole thing. This really is, you know, yeah, I don't know if there's any theater that still, you know, I mean, I think it would be good. I think that theaters should keep showing movies past when they're, you know, recently released and such, especially movies as important as this one. But if you sit down and determine to watch this whole thing in a single sitting and never take your eyes off the screen, just remember that this is not a movie made for, like, if Americans had made this movie, it would have been very different unless it was made outside of the mainstream Hollywood system. And again, some amazing movies have come out of the Hollywood system, but this is not this is a movie that they would definitely have tried to cut away and to, not necessarily cut content, but cut away from the horrors every so often. Try to have some, I mean, there are, there are moments where, the movie's never funny, but there are moments where, again, away from Hitler, they, they have these little, like, moments where they just, they find a little bit of relief. They mentally escape from the situation they're in. But yes, of course, any cutting away from the bunker does take us out of this tight perspective and full immersion of the bunker. Honestly, I think this would be a movie where it would be worth it to make like an alternate cut where you see nothing other than the bunker, and just, yeah, and that would of course also be, it wouldn't be as long of a movie unless there's stuff cut that they would be adding back in or something. But yeah, I 100% understand why that wasn't what they put in theaters. And with the decisions made, some of, the majority of this is based on actual, this is what they actually said and did in the last days of the Third Reich. But some, you do have characters saying and doing things that we don't know for sure that they did, at least, but exist in order to highlight all the awful. I mean, they fit in quite a lot of what Hitler did. As I said, you have the Hitler Youth, you have the abandonment of the civilians, and the horrors of war and such, and it really is it manages to fit in a lot, and Hitler does even express the awful, sick ideas that he had, and where, I mean, who knows if he said stuff like that near the very end of the Third Reich, but we know that he said these things and probably believed them, and they poisoned so many people, poisoned their minds and killed millions of people. And I mean, you can't, it's not right to make a movie about Hitler that goes into a lot of detail about who he was entirely without having these, showing that this was what he believed and argued for, and yeah. Characters. I realize this video as well might be difficult to watch, and I do want to make clear this is not... I knew what it was going to be like to talk about this movie. I've watched it a number of times, and I made the conscious decision to do this, I don't know, maybe a year ago or something, and I didn't change my mind in the time since. And yeah, this is important to me, even if this video is not, you know, most of my videos are more light, even if I do try to talk about important things. This is a movie, this is a film for viewers who already know most of the details about these people. You are not introduced to them, and if you go into this blind, you will be confused as to who is who, what their jobs are, and such. And that, again, the movie, it is important to remember this was made by Germans in German. It's not really, the movie was primarily made for a German audience. It's both the directing it as, you know, a German man directing this, you know, I'm not sure there's a single person who in the cast who is neither German or Russian. Obviously the Russians playing Russian soldiers and such. And yes, it being released to a German audience, you know, it's catharsis, and really the rest of the world as an audience for this does come second. And I mean, not everyone is going to know every single one of these people, but obviously you know, from history class, you know at least the gist of the very Himmler, Goebbels, and yeah, the you know, obviously we know. And the movie, it would have taken away from the focus, and it would, you know, yeah, it would be spending running time if these characters had to be introduced as such, keeping in mind there's a dozen, maybe dozen and a half major characters in this. I mean, there's, you know, there are way more overall actors cast in this, but then a number of them, you know, they don't appear much, and they maybe don't do or say very much. It's not important that you know every single one of them, but the officers, yeah, just Hitler's, just the military personnel, you know, many of them in the Führer bunker. I'd say there's at least a dozen people there. Excuse me. IMDb trivia. In many of the film scenes during 1945, Hitler's movements are as shaky as if he is nervous, especially during the war room scene. This is actually because Hitler is believed to have had Parkinson's and displayed many of the disease's trademark symptoms during his latter years. And more IMDb trivia. Bruno Ganz practiced Adolf Hitler's distinct Austrian accent with the help of a young actor from Hitler's area in Upper Austria. And after the film's release, Bruno Ganz stated that at first he didn't want the role of Adolf Hitler, and after viewing the film The Last 10 Days from 1955 and Albin Skoda's portrayal of Hitler, however, Ganz realized the role could be played with some depth and accepted the part. And many of Adolf Hitler's, a lot of this is IMDb trivia, so I'm not going to say every single time. I'm going to say when it isn't. Many of Adolf Hitler's lines are historically accurate based on accounts from Albert Speer and Tadl Jung. Most of them, however, are from earlier dates. Also helping Bruno Ganz in preparing for the role was the unique, only known recording of Adolf Hitler when he held a private conversation with Field Marshal Gustav Mannerheim of Finland, at that time a World War II ally of Germany against the Soviet Union. Hitler unexpectedly showed up to congratulate Mannerheim on his 75th birthday on June 4th, 1942. Finnish intelligence agents secretly made the recording in a train wagon, as Hitler did not allow recordings nor photographs to be taken in private. Some 11 minutes of the recording feature relaxed, normal tone talk in which Hitler generally described his views about the war, and one of 2 copies of the tape was discovered in 1992 and has since been studied by scientists and historians. And you can really tell this is one of the only depictions of Hitler that, yeah, really make him feel like a human being. You know, he wasn't always this, you know, everybody's seen recordings of the speeches where you see and hear what he was like during that. Obviously, he was not like that every moment that he was awake. And yeah, that's again something important, and a lot of people are gonna look for a while. That was all that was shown of Hitler, and it had the effect of like scaring, you know, people who weren't attracted to it were kind of scared away from it, were like they took Hitler more seriously, and that worked for a while. But after a while, maybe especially after we became more used to media, it has something of a numbing effect. It, you know, it's so grandiose, and the problem is that if you think that that's what it takes for someone, I suppose, not quite like Hitler, it's not, we're hopefully not ever going to have someone quite like him, but a fellow dictator, a fellow totalitarian ruler who uses some of the same underlying ideas and such, and appeals to people in the same way. In Nazi Germany, it worked for him to be shouting, and the body language. It's not going to work today in most countries of the world because everybody's seen those speeches. And again, you know, today, thankfully, almost no one looks at that and thinks that there was anything good about it. But that doesn't mean that the same ideas can't be communicated to many of today's. This is something that ContraPoints has been excellent at exposing. Many of today's Nazis just speak softly, and when that gets a strong reaction from the rest of us, they say, see, I'm calm, why can't he be calm? Why can't we calmly discuss these ideas? Because they know that it pushes a lot of people away to very directly do it. Very, very few people actually, in front of other people at the very least, actually do the Heil salute, for example. And back to IMDb trivia. Bruno Ganz studied Parkinson's disease patients in a Swiss hospital to prepare for his role as Hitler. And the movie features interview samples of the real, Traudl Jungen, who that actually, if you don't already know, that she is a major character in this, and really probably the single most featured first-person perspective on this whole thing. Again, you know, the scenes outside of the Hitler bunker, she mostly isn't present for, but most of the Hitler bunker, you know, she wasn't always completely fit. You know, sometimes she's just within earshot or such. But yeah, a lot of, I'd say probably most of it, either she's physically present, or you can believe that this was something that she heard described by someone else in the bunker. But yes, the featured interview samples of a real child young are taken from the documentary Blind Spot, recorded in April and July 2001. And due to serious health problems, Young wasn't able to attend the film's premiere on the 9th of February 2002. The premiere had been a great success, and the cameraman went to the hospital to inform Young, whereupon she is said to have answered, "My life work is accomplished. Now I can let go," and just hours later she died, aged 82, after a long fight against cancer. Now, I'm not going to go too much into detail about the specific cast. Everyone is incredibly talented and looks exactly right, which is, of course, immensely important for, yeah, that is one area. Mostly, I am not particularly fond of animation, 2D CGI. Not as a, I don't want to say genre, because that is one thing where it's been a while since I watched. I guess I don't even offhand remember her name, but Bionic Dance. It's been a long time since I watched, but one of the last videos I did see of her was one where she argued that animation is not a genre of movie, and that is completely true. It is merely a description, you know, same as you know, if you might say what language the movie is in, at least if it's not in English, which, you know, let's be honest, most of the English-speaking world is most familiar with and used to, but you don't, it's not a genre the way drama and horror are genres. I suppose some would argue drama isn't either, but the horror, science fiction, so on and so forth, as a type of movie, as opposed to live action. I prefer live action, but I do recognize that there are a lot of great performances from voice actors who look nothing like the character they're portraying, and that is an obvious strength of voice acting and of animation over a live action. And I think this is especially, personally at least, I see this more in video games, because I play far more video games than I watch animation. And Thomas Kretschmann is, you know, basically the one face non-Germans recognized back then. You know, some of the actors have done other things since this that, yeah, that isn't just specifically German, you know. And of course, not every Kretschmann non-German role is necessarily remembered positively. I'm not sure this, I think this did come out after Resident Evil Apocalypse, and yeah, he does a far better job in this. Rewatched for research. I rewatched Hitler: The Rise of Evil, one of the only other movies about Hitler that I personally own a copy of, and The Invasion, the only other film by the same director that I've watched at all. I would like to watch, I forget if it's called Das Experiment. I don't know German basically at all, so I'm not certain if it's Das or Der, but I think it's Das Experiment. And I intend to do a separate video on at least The Invasion in the future. I'm not sure about Rise. If I do that, it would be from having researched and trying to correct the many things that it almost definitely intentionally gets wrong, which is a very, I think that's exactly the wrong way to do any kind of, I think the only reason you might ever want to, or the only time where it would ever be even remotely okay to openly just lie about who Hitler was and just say that he never for a second showed any kind of, we know he was very gentle with his dog and his secretaries, and this was basically because they did what he told them to. He could control them very easily, so he complimented them because they did what he said. And that was what he wanted from his fellow man. Not being challenged, not having any kind of, and I don't mean challenge, I mean having someone discuss your ideas without them just agreeing with you. He did not want. And that's the, again, people today say these Nazis can't be as bad. Look, they're not shouting, and they're not, some of them aren't even like openly violent. They're just calmly arguing for some of the most evil ideas. I mean, that's not how they would say it, but some of the most evil ideas ever conceived by anyone in human history. The only way that it would ever be okay is when if a child, when children first learn of Hitler, if they do so at an age where they can't understand it, I could understand not telling them that he was sometimes a calm man, and he treated a few people well. He didn't shout at everyone, and not everything he said was awful. Yeah, I can't think of any other situation, or someone with the mind of a child, or such, if you're, yeah, or if you are mocking him, using humor. And again, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about this. For that kind of thing, I urge you to watch Lindsay Ellis's excellent video on The Producers, and that movie on its own, although, by today's standards, that movie does, I don't think it is Mel Brooks' strongest work. I'm sorry, but you can kind of tell that he was not that experienced with feature films at the time. I'm not entirely sure how much I'm going to go into this, but yes, I'm going to go into some critic. Yeah. The Rotten Tomatoes. This has a 91% on the tomato meter with an average rating of 8 out of 10 and 124 fresh reviews and 13 rotten. with the consensus, The Downfall is an illuminating, thoughtful, and detailed account of Hitler's last days. An audience score of 94% and an average user rating of 4.2 out of 5 from 70,074 ratings. Excuse me, and I do want to say it's quite clear when you look at what people said, critics and otherwise, that it's not from any kind of, it's not like people who didn't like it are in some way in favor. Rather, the people who really didn't like the movie, certainly critics. They're people who object to the idea of a humanizing film about Hitler, and I've just gone into why I think that's important. And I respectfully disagree with those who, but I completely understand those who find that you should only focus on him shouting and looking kind of ridiculous, really. It is the way he presented himself and his troops and all this, the really, it only appealed to his people in his time, in the specific situation they were in, almost exclusively. Reception. Wikipedia. The film has a Metascore of 82 out of 100 based on 35 reviews, indicating universal acclaim. Now, yeah, I'm not gonna. Now, consider as biography, the achievement, if that's the right word, is to insist that the monster was not invariably monstrous, that he was kind to his cook and his young female secretaries, loved his German shepherd Blondie, and was surrounded by loyal subordinates. And he questions, is this observation I suppose, yeah, we get the point. Hitler was not a supernatural being. He was common clay raised to power by the desire of his followers. But is this observation a sufficient response to what Hitler actually did? And I think it is in here somewhere as well. No, just to make sure that I do say it. And another critic points out there probably isn't a sufficient response, and this is basically what Mel Brooks says. You can't do what he did to him or to the Nazis. The only thing you can do, in Brooks's words, was tear him down with mockery. And in the case of this film, show his frailties to remind us that, he was basically, monstrous ideas and actions, but in human form. He didn't, he wasn't constantly, you look at actual propaganda posters and such, and you see babies, impaled on bayonets and such to make you truly hate the enemy, and that makes sense for trying to get people hateful enough that they're willing to kill fellow human beings. But the problem then is that when they meet the enemy on more human terms, they might sympathize with them, where, you know, that's the downside of using that to, I can understand using that to get people to kill the soldiers on the other side, but perhaps more a foundation that is less susceptible to then being torn apart by the realization that they're human beings just like us, is to remind that if you don't kill them, they will kill you and or those close to you, whether literally, you know, geographically and such, or actual, you know, and of course this isn't true of every single soldier, but ultimately it does, in war, that is what it comes down to, and that is the realization that, and I'm speaking as someone who's never been to war and almost definitely never will. Excuse me. I use a carpet to lessen the creaking of my floor, and this time I forgot to lay down before hitting record. Yes, to return to the Wikipedia, a few journalists in Germany wondered aloud whether the human treatment of Hitler might not inadvertently aid the neo-Nazi movement. But in his many rants in the film, Hitler says that the German people do not deserve to survive. They had failed him by losing the war and must perish. Not exactly the sentiments that would spark a recruitment drive. This Hitler may be human, but he's as utterly degraded a human being as has ever been shown on the screen, a man whose every impulse leads to annihilation. Yeah, and another quote. Knowing what I did of the bunker story, I found it hard to imagine that anyone other than the usual neo-Nazi fringe could possibly find Hitler a sympathetic figure during his bizarre last days. And to presume that it might be somehow dangerous to see him as a human being, well, what does that thought imply about the self-confidence of a stable liberal democracy? Hitler was, after all, a human being, even if an especially obnoxious, detestable specimen. We well know that he could be kind and considerate to his secretaries, and with the next breath show cold ruthlessness, dispassionate brutality in determining the deaths of millions. And Ebert wrote, "Admiration I did not feel. Sympathy I felt in the sense that I would feel it for a rabid dog, while accepting that it must be destroyed. I do not feel the film provides a sufficient response to what Hitler actually did, because I feel no film can, and no response would be sufficient. As we regard this broken and pathetic Hitler, we realize that he did not alone create the Third Reich, but was the focus for a spontaneous uprising by many of the German people, fueled by racism, xenophobia, grandiosity, and fear. He was skilled in the ways he exploited that feeling and surrounded himself by gifted strategists and propagandists, but he was not a great man, simply one armed by fate to unleash unimaginable evil. It is useful to reflect that racism, xenophobia, grandiosity, and fear are still with us, and the defeat of one of their manifestations does not inoculate us against others." And this paragraph I agree with wholeheartedly. And And director Oliver Hirschbiegel confirmed that the filmmakers sought to give Hitler a three-dimensional personality. We know from all accounts that he was a very charming man, a man who managed to seduce a whole people into barbarism. And there's more here, and I'm not going to go into it. It's in the Wikipedia. It at least currently is. It's not impossible that it will eventually be edited out or such. But in the Wikipedia article under reception. Now, Critics Pro. An unflinching, hard, relentlessly honest movie that refuses to ask questions that have easy answers. It is also brilliantly acted, written, and focused. Downfall isn't about commuting history's sentence for the Nazis, but heeding its warning. A gruesome, sustained tension lesson about informed politics and whether those who left evil to its own devices could arrive at a place of complicit guilt. Features a staggeringly creepy performance by Bruno Ganz, whose Hitler is both a raving psychotic and a beaten, melancholic man. Now, yeah, one reviewer says the Downfall is an admirably matter-of-fact history lesson of a movie, but next to real footage of real people with real memories of those days, it pales by comparison, and I respectfully disagree. I think reenactment, visually seeing these things, genuinely does make a strong impact. I don't think I saw a critic. I read every professional critic. I did not read a lot of user reviews of this, but I didn't see a professional critic say, but I could imagine some might watch this movie and feel that there are too many executions of perceived traitors, too much callous death, and I completely disagree, and part of it is that, you know, yeah, this isn't a spoiler. We do all know what happened at the very end of the Third Reich, when it was completely clear that they would lose, and to Russians at that. Many of them did commit suicide or have someone shoot them, and it matters when this is a movie. A lot of action movies have a lot of people shot to death, sometimes with a lot of gore, and the thing that, and sometimes that is very effective. In this movie, it's effective that You know these people's names. You've seen them say and do things. Some of them are frustrated with Hitler in this, in his refusal to change course, to accept what is happening. Some of them remain completely faithful and refuse to leave the bunker. And when after all of that you see so many of them be executed or commit suicide or the like, it matters in a way that seeing a lot of death, on-screen death, of a ton of people that you feel really nothing for. At most, there may be faceless goons that the hero kills in order to, while we cheer him on, which is, again, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. Or they're civilians killed by the bad guys to cement that they're bad guys or the like. And it's different when these are, again, so many of these people were truly horrible. I mean, they might disagree with Hitler, but not about what he did, just how he did it. They're frustrated that it didn't work out, that he didn't get to do the thing he said he would, that they followed him in hopes that they would be able to do. Yeah, they thought and did awful things, but then to see after all of this, so many of them, and again, other directors would have chosen to do it off screen and simply told us that it happened or such, but yeah, to actually show it legitimately, it has an effect that it just doesn't to, and it isn't cheering. To get back to the reviews. There have been plenty of World War II films over the years, but none delivers as intimate a portrait of German dictator Adolf Hitler and his comrades. And so, yeah, some say that the movie didn't, it's a missed opportunity or the like, and I disagree. A lot of movies have been made about Adolf Hitler, but this is certainly one of the best. It shows the psychology that goes on when a leader and his followers fall from power. A long stare into an abyss from which no comforting answers can emerge. The film's searing portrayal of an utterly pathetic fanaticism is its most enduring effect. Downfall takes on the unenviable task of portraying Hitler as a man, rather than a caricature or parody, as the norm has dictated. Hirschbiegel and Eichenka, with the help of a blistering performance by Gans, strip away the myth from the monster, laying bare the utter banality of his evil. Juggling multiple characters and plot lines with rare finesse, the movie cuts from tense meetings inside Hitler's bunker to the mayhem and carnage on the streets of Berlin outside. And that's another, it really does the that's the thing. If you did not, if this movie only had the scenes inside the bunker, then there would not be the same weight to when Hitler says that civilians, when he makes such callous statements about not helping them and such. If we didn't see civilians also, and his all this talk about how he's been betrayed would not have the same effect if we didn't see people who did not seem at all like they betrayed him, and seeing these faithful Hitler youth in the streets that this again, there's a contrast there between how he perceives that everyone has willfully abandoned him, while children fight to keep him safe, and you want to walk up to these children and shake them and say, he doesn't care about you, he thinks you're nothing, and that's again, and then you have this doctor going around trying to help people. Again, such it completely, there's no, it makes it impossible to justify the callousness of Hitler and the others in the bunker with, well, in that particular situation everyone becomes completely callous and such. When you see an actual doctor, which really, that almost, a doctor trying to heal people is basically the single. And again, this man, it's not that he like is completely, he's not like, he is a German doctor, and he is running around treating Germans, so he doesn't, if he was like openly not a Nazi, he wouldn't be there. He'd be dead or in a concentration camp. And both that's how he's using his passion and his skill and ambition. And yeah, the fact that someone like that, and really, we see one in the movie, but we focus on one in the movie, but obviously, yeah, there are people like that. There are people who are working extremely hard to save people while meaningless, violent conflict is going on all around them. And yeah, this doctor is the antithesis to Hitler himself, without being that's an extremely important aspect of the movie. The movie is not saying every German was, necessarily did evil things, and not even necessarily every single Nazi. The Hitler youth are clearly just misguided. It's just they have a strong leader, and he's promising to do amazing things for this country that, several of these, they're so young, they don't even remember all they remember is Hitler talking about how strong he's going to make the country. They probably don't even remember. They only know from parents and grandparents telling them the state that Germany was in before World War II, where you do understand. Again, you can't, I find it impossible to sympathize with Hitler himself, but you can understand why so many people supported him so passionately, because he really did and it's not, you know, they tried. The people who really fought for a democratic Germany, they tried. They did a lot of work to try to make it work as a democracy, but you can understand when you look at the details why they failed and why although he did not actually, he didn't win completely, he didn't get enough votes to completely, but why he did get as much support as he did. A serious and useful film in that it reminds us that the capacity for evil is a human trait. While it's deeply disturbing and often difficult to watch, Downfall is a towering achievement that shouldn't be missed. Gans enthuses a dominating passion that wilts all those around him. Particularly detailed in showing the military and social crumbling of the Reich, perhaps too detailed at more than 2.5 hours. And again, I don't think it's too long. It could have been, but I don't think it is. Bruno Ganz dominates Downfall, a long but never dull look at Hitler's final days in his Berlin bunker. Some demons are too extreme to comprehend, but Hirschspiegel's film nonetheless provides a painfully unflinching glimpse into the outer workings of the mortally wounded Third Reich. Absolutely brilliant in depicting with sharp historical accuracy how a destructive system will eventually turn on itself. Bruno Ganz is terrific as Hitler, fully depicting his physical frailties and brilliantly capturing his speech patterns, but never allowing the performance to become a caricature. Crams all the madness and perversity of the Third Reich into 12 days in a claustrophobic bunker. Pays such attention to detail that the viewer feels privy to surveillance tapes inside the Führer's headquarters. There are war films and there are films about the Nazis. Downfall is more personal and more riveting than either. With a steely, unblinking resolve, Downfall stares into the abyss but does not pretend to comprehend it. It certainly benefits from the presence of Ganz, the veteran German actor who portrays Hitler. Character actor, sorry. In the end, Downfall can't cut through Hitler's enigma, but it does powerfully illuminate the people drawn to him. An epic without an epic hero, an epic of deserved defeat. While he doesn't necessarily sympathize with Hitler and his cronies, Oliver Hirschspiegel does make the Führer seem almost human with Downfall. Ganz remains the film's riveting centerpiece. The film warns us to be wary of true believers of any affiliation. They gave us the mandate, says Goebbels, and now their little throats are being cut. A somber accounting crafted with impressive verisimilitude and anchored by Bruno Ganz' rock-solid performance as the Führer, perhaps the definitive film on its subject. Give him a hunchback and Ganz Hitler could be Richard III offering his kingdom for a tank. And I think this, I don't know that I necessarily agree. I don't know, I might be misunderstanding what he's saying, but I do think this quote is noteworthy. Viewed through a North American lens, the movie itself seems more familiar than fascinating, more innocuous than inflammatory, and at 2.5 hours, more tedious than anything else. And I'm not certain if he's saying that they should have made the film differently, or if he is just copying to this movie was not made for me, basically. Again, keeping in mind I am Western European, and this I've been hearing about Hitler since I was a child, and yeah, you know, I don't think Americans could completely understand, at least not have the kind of inside perspective is too much, just too big a, it isn't the right word to use, but when I've met countless Germans, you know, they're not running around shouting Hitler propaganda, and they're not, you know, they're not calling for the extermination of Jews or other minorities. You know, it's different when it's so close. Even if I don't know about direct contact with the Third Reich except through what others have told me, and my father was born just as it ended, basically. So it's really only through grandparents that, but the you know, I've taken in some of the German culture, and in a lot of ways, you know, we have, it's different when a lot of the German words for the ideas and the various things are so close to the words you yourself use, you know, that they take on a different meaning. The one of the things that the American troops did to try to other the Germans to make it easier to kill them was focus on the fact that they ate what I guess maybe it is the same word that the English still that is still used in English. They ate sauerkraut, and thus they call them krauts. You know, to try to put to try to have as little in common with them as possible. And yeah, you know, when you can just take basic words and parts of their culture and very easily turn it, you know, mock it. It's different from having from being so close to it. Getting back to the quote, a masterful piece of storytelling, a hypnotizing experience that so completely grips the viewer that when you stumble from the theater after 2.5 hours, you carry the unshakable sensation of having eavesdropped on history. For emotional effect, it trades less in the spectacle of ebbing power than the tragedy of power's mysterious thrall. A dense, long, claustrophobic look at the fall of Berlin and Hitler's final days. Hirschbiegel and Gans are not apologizing for Nazism, they're trying to come to terms with the fact that the evils of Nazism were invented and carried out by human beings. The question of moral culpability raised by the movie is interesting and complex. Gans is astonishing, tackling his unseemly subject with guts, vigor, and a fair share of eerie charm. In a remarkable performance, perhaps the most impressive portrait of Hitler ever captured on film, Bruno Gans plays Hitler's delusional, hateful, and cruel man, but also human. The attempt at understanding is the goal of history and of art too, and the success of Downfall is that it manages to be both. Harrowingly claustrophobic and mesmerizing, it drains your spirit, but you can't look away. I want to go into more that the fact that this is a piece of art, in addition to history, is also why I feel it's superior to, and I'm not saying it's incredibly important to be making documentaries wherein the real people describe in their own words, but there's something to breaking something down into a single story to be told. Because really, when you talk about Hitler, there are so many different stories. There is the story of the frailty of the German democracy at that point in time, very young, the state of the country itself after World War I, and Hitler's personal background, the state of world powers at the time, the reparations expected from Germany, from the other country, from the victorious countries, expected from this one country that had been defeated, that was weak at the time. When you compare it to the Marshall help, there's a reason why we didn't see why it didn't come again, 10, 20 years down the line, why it hasn't come again, so many decades down the line. And there are a lot of different stories, but to put so much of it into the one story with story structure, with main characters and such, it really does a lot. There are a lot of people who are never going to get through a whole book or even a documentary about this subject, but that can sit down and watch this movie, because when it is communicated to us in as a feature movie with one clear storyline and clear characters and such, it's film can make things feel real. A live action film often imitates. It's the idea is to trick the eye and the brain into thinking that what we're seeing happened the way we're seeing it, and to take something that was real and then present it in this way. Just there's the fact that we intellectually know that at least something extremely close to this did happen, and then the effect that good good filmmaking, when intending to have that effect, has of tricking the eye and the brain into thinking that what we're seeing happened the way we're seeing it, is incredibly powerful. To get back to the reviews, this one reviewer says, and I don't quite agree, but yeah, the film works best when the camera moves outside Hitler's bunker to the war-torn city on the surface, but those definitely are very compelling. Gans seems to find exactly the right pitch. His Hitler feels real and human, yet we never forget. Yet there's nothing particularly ingratiating or sentimentalized about him. We never forget who he is. The final scenes of chaos in mid-1945 Berlin are simply riveting. There are many lessons to be gleaned from Downfall. Perhaps the most important is that absolute faith in one's own virtue is not a commitment to virtuous behavior, but a commitment to one's own will. It's a license to commit atrocities, which is incredibly well put. Succeeds perhaps too well for us to believe Hitler was some aberration who could never happen again. A figure as large and infamous as Hitler creates a certain amount of inevitable fascination, and Downfall definitely benefits from such curiosity. Provides a compelling glimpse at a nation wrestling with its greatest demon. A once-in-a-lifetime performance from Bruno Ganz. Arresting and skillfully made. Hirschspiegel's ambitious and complex dramatization of the final days of Adolf Hitler and the collapse of Germany is a compelling history lesson and a riveting drama. Some may feel that portraying a Hitler with such human dimension does a disservice to those who died and suffered at his command. Actually, the treatment makes him more accessible and therefore more terrifying. An intense, incredibly exciting thriller. Yes, these people had evil in them, and yes, they were pathetically deluded by something they saw in Hitler. The film doesn't try to explain that. But when you look at them up close, they don't look that different from you and me. Few movies, indeed, have ever more completely conveyed Arendt's juxtaposition of the evil that sent millions to their graves with the stultifying banality of their murderers' lives. Some kind of special Oscar needs to be created for Bruno Ganz, whose transformation into Adolf Hitler shatters cliches. What works best in the picture are the dialogue-free scenes when the music comes up and the horror of the destruction washes over the audience like waves of blood. Too chilling, spine-chilling experience, a masterpiece of filmmaking, and a document which conclusively curses the repetition of its history. Not to be missed. You feel as if you are a fly on the wall of the real bunker with the real Hitler, Eva Braun, Goebbels, the real everything. It's appalling stuff, as it should be. A case study in human horror that should be studied and never ever forgotten. may well become a necessary bookend for any other film about World War II in Europe, if only as a reminder of how common evil can be. Any film that reminds us what our darkest nature looks like has value for that reason alone. Herr Spiegel's gripping account of Adolf Hitler's ignominious end is a historical reenactment that hits like a swift kick to the gut. A film that is revealingly human without ever being sympathetic or apologetic. It's the well-wrought details that explain, perhaps better than any earlier film, how an entire country bought into Hitler's genocidal madness. The very thought of humanizing Hitler makes me queasy. If he had a good side, I don't want to know about it. And again, I've explained why, but I do think, it's not, really, as long as you aren't a Nazi of any kind, if you have some objection to this movie, I do think that it is fair to, it would be ironic if I insisted that there was only one way to look at it and everyone else was wrong. Explores the final 10 days of the 20th century's most hateful genocidal killer with a degree of objectivity, humanity, and unflinching intensity. Its extended running time and the sheer brutality of its subject matter will likely make this film a tough sell for non-hardcore history buffs. And that is, and again, it's not really made to, it's not supposed to be appealing, it's not supposed to be pleasant viewing. Really, you couldn't, if you made something that wasn't horrifying and heavy about this subject, yeah, then we are in producer's territory, or or bad movies about Hitler territory. Herr Spiegel's film pulls no punches. He neither sugarcoats nor exaggerates. Hitler is played with pitch-perfect precision by the Swiss-born Bruno Ganz. A riveting recreation of three world-changing collapses, those of the Nazi Party, militarized Germany as a whole, and of the Führer who guided them into self-destructive ruin. Downfall is not only terrific cinema, it is also a history lesson, gripping psychological study, and a dire warning. You feel privy to mysterious secrets and a monumental unraveling. It's impossible to look away. One of the most finely crafted World War II films ever made. Dramatizes how Hitler tapped the gnashing urge of his anger and built it into a force field, shutting out all that he didn't want to see. could very well be one of the most important films of the year. Downfall may be grimly self-important and inescapably trivializing, but we should be grateful that German cinema is more inclined to normalize the nation's history than rewrite it. Yeah, I definitely do agree that it would be awful to rewrite. I'm not sure I agree with much else in that review. That review quote. Tour de force acting by Bruno Ganz in this taut story of Hitler's final days. Well worth seeing for all the nuances and variations we know little about. Like the deadly serpent's stare, Downfall hypnotizes. An exhausting soap opera of doom that cuts back and forth between what seems like 100 speaking parts and conveys a chilling vision of rats being slowly flushed down a toilet. As Hitler, Bruno Ganz ignites the screen with every appearance. His rages against traitors and betrayal, perceived and real, are delivered with ugly conviction. There should have been another hour dramatizing the collapsing military situation and the futile defenses of the German people, military and civilian, which, again, I think it would be interesting to make. I mean, at that point, you really are almost talking about a different movie or at least, yeah, maybe if you cut this movie into just the bunker parts and then you had another movie of only this military civilian stuff. Hitler's final days are brought to horrifying life in Downfall, a movie that's not a whole lot of fun but commands one's unflinching attention for 150 straight minutes. And that is that. Bringing us to thoughts.
Please note that this video has spoilers for the subject.
Notes taken during watching. I noted everything that made an impression on me or that I thought was interesting. I don't have, not every single note that I made I have something to say about. And the lines fly by. I don't speak German, the subtitles were not in English, so I had to translate them, and I did not pause to give extra time to type. In other words, a lot of these quotes are incomplete. I tried to get the most important parts of all the quotes I wanted. I cannot forgive that we did not see through it, that I said yes. I wasn't a Nazi. I could have said no. I do not want to be a part of it. In a way, I did not think fate would place me somewhere I didn't want to be, and yet I have a hard time forgiving myself. You will merely answer, Heil, mein Führer. You don't need to do the salute. He doesn't need soldiers, but a secretary. I don't know completely how I feel about them showing basically, this part before the end of the Reich, the 2.5 years before when Traudl Junge first met Hitler. I understand it. It's the first impression kind of thing, and it's also that really, I mean, we understand that it's communicated that the pressure and they feel honored. These young women, they feel honored to be there. They feel they desperately want to impress him. They want to help him. And I mean, really, if they did not feel that way, they likely wouldn't be right then there. I mean, even if they didn't like hugely disagree, which they would probably have kept secret, they would still even yeah, they felt that. And you the everyone can relate to being in a situation where you feel you really want to do well at a thing, and you feel you're being judged for your performance and such. And it is the fact that she really tries, and then she accidentally mistypes, and he walks up behind her and he looks over and he sees that she mistyped, and then she stopped typing, and she's disappointed in herself, and she feels she's certain now that she won't get the job, and she let down the leader of the whole, the most important man to her and to her country. And he takes it so well. He's such, the yeah, that he merely says, let's do that again. The way he later in the film, she says, I'm sorry, I must have fallen asleep, and he merely said, are you rested now? The when other times he takes, he reacts so violently to things that where no one did anything wrong, where he's maybe unreasonable for expecting, or yeah, and he flies into furious rage. And yeah, then that contrast, and the weight of this first meeting, I understand, but I don't know if I feel that it should have been in the movie. Hypothetically, again, let's say, slightly recutting the film, and I don't think very much of the film needs at all. There's almost nothing in this film that I don't think is the right way, but just, yeah, imagine that it literally opens, we simply open on the bombing, and then the line, how's this for a birthday present? And the text doesn't say 2.5 years later, it just says 1945, and Hitler's 56th birthday. And one of the first things Hitler even says is, Blondie, his dog, is smart. You're smarter than people. And again, because he just wanted someone to do what he said. And yeah, the reintroduction to Hitler, his hand shaking, and he does the lazy return Heil, not bothering to do the full Heil, expecting the best of others, whilst himself not bothering. That is something that you find when you research Hitler. The man, he did not think that he needed to bother to do hard work. If yeah, he came close to starving to death, basically, from not being able to make money. And to be fair, there were others who could not make money in Germany at that time. But he was still, in that situation especially, you would expect someone to become highly disciplined. But one of the attempts on his life, he survived because he went there to give a speech, and he didn't get the rousing response that he had expected, so he left in a huff. He was the fact that they didn't love his every word was such an insult to him that he left immediately, almost immediately. I think it's strong that when we see the reintroduction to Hitler, we don't immediately see his face. We see his hand behind his back, and we see him do the salute. And I do think that it might have been strong if that was the very first time we saw Hitler. But again, I appreciate the contrast is quite strong. He's much in just 2.5 years. He's aged a decade, you know. And the lines, the supply of food will break down. A good soldier always finds food. Yes, and French courage is stronger than bullets. And he points out they will have to find food among the population. They say an army marches on its stomach. So many wars have been greatly affected by whether they could get food and other supplies. First heil, then get bent. Before it's too late. Too late? When I am dead, you will have plenty of time to do politics. And even early in the film, we see people talking about Hitler behind his back. Even the bombing of our city has a silver lining. It will be easier to remove the rubble than to tear down the buildings ourselves. And him looking over the model of the city, this was what was parodied, because even back then we knew that this had happened, was parodied in 1994 Street Fighter. Even with everything collapsing around him, Hitler refused to accept that the Reich wouldn't last. And gradually we see more characters in the room with Hitler. And we're introduced to the Hitler Youth, teenage soldiers, passionate, loyal, tragic. And how can you think you will last 5 minutes? We have made an oath to the Führer, and his son cries, coward. And they desperately try to talk sense into Hitler at the map. He becomes frustrated when they point out the logic holes in his orders. The 3 million civilians must be evacuated. We cannot deal with so-called civilians, but the women and the children. In this kind of war, there is no such thing as civilians. It becomes so much easier when you rationalize it like that. Suddenly, he didn't get 3 million civilians. They didn't all die, but in this particular situation, he doesn't know that they're not all going to die, and he doesn't even pause to think of the weight of that. He immediately moves. It cannot, And Tauro, imagine, she can't face her family and her friends. They warned her, and Eva Braun arranged a party. It is a death sentence for the German people. If we lose the war, it does not matter if the people perish. If the people are weak, it is only natural for them to die. And the bombing stops the music, and Eva said, play something, I want to dance. This is her way of dealing with the stress of the confinement. Even thinking it is a good thing to be this close to the Führer, it is a gilded cage. It is also unreal, like a dream you want to wake up from, but you can't. And there's more bombing, and the cloud of dust covers the room. It becomes impossible to ignore the danger and how close it is. See that? That's where Germany ends. Past that is Ruski land. And you see a pile of dead, several of them naked. No dignity in their death, no burial, no time for it. And the old and wounded remain. They couldn't evacuate, and they're not even, they don't see him and think, oh, thank goodness, maybe now we can be saved. They've accepted, they've given up. Completely resigned to their fate. And we see urban warfare, one of the fiercest types of battles to partake in. Every building could hide an enemy or be collapsed onto those nearby. And I do think that there's, this has the kid jumps out of he was behind the sandbags and but he leaps up and they shoot and he jumps back down. Realistically, the kid would probably have been killed there. Automatic weapons fire at that range, and it's there for the effect, and it's really one of the absolute only Hollywood moments in battle scenes in this. What Hitler says is pure fantasy. Everyone close to him knows it. I wonder if he believes it himself. And Hitler reasons, after Steiner's attack, it will work out, and he manages to excuse everyone but the four before his furious rant about the hopeless orders not working out. How dare they refuse my orders? Everyone lies to me, even the SS. The paranoia on display is stunning, staggering. And allow me to translate what Hitler said. My ambition mean that they should be able to do what I say, realistic or not. They will drown in their own blood. My Führer, I will remain as well. Even at that time, she still won't give up on him. 1918 will never happen again, and that is part of it. That's such an important line. And I don't know if one of them literally said that, but if it's possible that not a single one of them said it, but I don't think that a single one of the adults didn't, at least at some point in those 12 days, think it. And again, this is where an American movie might have had just a brief, like, exposition or something of what that means, but any German citizen who does not know what that means must simply be too young and very likely slept through history class or something. Yeah, I mean, that's like, you don't, no matter what American you talk to, words like D-Day and Alamo mean something. You don't have to exposit about it. These are old men, civilians. You can't do this. No, who's going to stop me? You. And he kills them on the spot. The ruthlessness of the Nazi, just if you are not strong enough, if you do not do what we want you to, yeah. And you see the sawn off limb land in this pile of maybe half a dozen, saving lives, but at what cost? Their lack of experience will be outweighed by their passion. The people have made their decision. And just the children, it hurts to see in such a dreary setting such happy children, especially on rewatches, or just if you know from history class, knowing their fate. And they applaud the singing, enjoying culture and tradition, even as everything crumbles around them. It's truly sickening bringing children into this kind of situation. I realize that it's possible that they simply thought that a world without Nazism would not be worth living. Maybe they feared that awful things would be done to them by Russian soldiers, in which case I can begin to comprehend, but it's still just so disgusting. And they discuss methods of suicide as if they were talking about their preferred pizza toppings. I am sorry I cannot give you a more beautiful gift. And the doctor seen briefly taking in wounded, his white clothes covered in blood. And one of the Hitler youth has another shoot her as she hiles, and he then shoots himself. And the kid goes up and you want to shake him the way you're shaking her. She's dead. Stop trying to wake her back up. She's dead. Your female teenage friend is dead. We won't be able to send our orders out. For what is left for the Fuhrer, he does not need your help. But the children, I thought there was a way out, some way out, and the realization that the children here will die as well, and she probably even feels bad that the children arriving made her think she herself would survive. If the idea of Nazism dies, there is no future. And Hitler recites his belief that the weak must not survive, only the strong. I let them invade the country. He truly was delirious, completely delusional. I did not know we had such reserve forces. And 1,000 planes, and I'm not 100% certain if they had that many, but if I recall, the problem was they had no fuel for the planes to fly. And again, this is such, even there are people who say, oh, the Nazis weren't that bad. You must at the very least admit that there were ridiculous mistakes made in leadership. Just if you can't hate Hitler for his ideas, at least hate him for being such a failure. And letting so many people die, killing so many people, because he is a failure, because he wanted to prove something. And then when he couldn't, he just resigned, not only himself, but his people to death. He didn't stop to think. He blamed, I noted that quote as well. He said, fate wouldn't have it any other way. And you see the little girl saying, oh, Brigitte is also hungry, and he pulls the pins on 2 grenades under the table, and the doll is blown out of the building. Just, again, this is a scene where a lot of movies would show the gore, and I'm incredibly relieved that they made the right decision and did not show it. It's the doll itself that's exactly the right way to show it. And you have the party with drunkenness, dancing, topless girls. He wanted to escape. Why does it matter? We lost. My sister is carrying his child. We cannot abide weakness. And Fegelein is shot, Heiling Hitler. And yeah, and here we have, I must have fallen asleep. Are you properly rested? So tender with his personal secretary and his dog. and so ruthless with countless women and children who did nothing that led to his feeling on the matter, other than be born German in Hitler's time. Note that I did not say anything wrong other than obviously they did nothing wrong, period. And Hitler and Eva Marian, of course, don't have to prove that they are pure Aryans. And the crying nurse, lead us and we will follow. They simply refuse to give up. And that is, again, it's true that the movie doesn't really show a Hitler that you understand people getting behind, but it does show a lot of people still being completely behind him, even here at the end. And that is incredibly important. It's not, that's another thing, a lot of, again, it's not, I'm not saying that every single one of them wanted 6 million Jews to die, but it is important to note that not every single one of them did, just follow orders. Many of them did genuinely believe in him. They believed that if they did what he wanted, good things would happen. And it's incredibly important to remember to any time you see anyone inspiring a lot of people to do a certain thing or to accept something or the like, you have to stop and think, is this right? Or is this a right way, right direction to move in? And are we going down a path where we might end up doing something horrible? And I don't think there are, thankfully, not many countries left in the world, not many democracies left in the world where a Holocaust might happen. But I do think we have to seriously consider, whenever we make decisions, change laws or the like, and take action concerning Muslims, we have to be ready we can't let another Holocaust happen, no matter what you think of their religion, of their ethnicity. And Trower points out, when he's himself, he can be so nice, and then he says the most horrible things. And Eva, you mean when he's their Führer? And again, you see people smoking and or drinking when Hitler isn't around, and they are, for example, stressed. And they joke about the bombed houses. Yes, tomorrow millions will curse my name. Fate wouldn't have it any other way. And the children joke about bombing and gunfire. They can't do anything else to calm themselves under the circumstances. And Charlotte gets the girl back into the room, and she doesn't understand that what is being carried are dead bodies, and those of Hitler and Eva at that. And Charlotte sees the blood stains after the suicides. And you see still hanging traitors after the Führer is dead. And the child tries to stop the soldier from killing them. It's just... And run, Grandpa, and just... It's such... you see that and you think they're gonna be shot in the back. And hanged bodies with signs calling them traitors, practically defacing their bodies. And the movie goes on for about half an hour after Hitler's death. The Reich dies with him, but not immediately, and definitely not as painlessly as he. And thankfully not every individual in Berlin died. And if Junge hadn't made it out, we would know so much less about these last 12 days. Hitler would remain the mythic beast he would have preferred, rather than the mere human that he wanted to keep hidden from all but the ones closest to him, who he couldn't hide it from. And the children trust their parents that it's medicine, and Helga doesn't want to and has to be forced. and until the very end, talking about racial purity, having it written down so the words will outlive him. And she poisons the children, asleep from the medication, pulling sheets over their heads to cover their dead faces, exposing their bare feet. It's strange how the mirror image of the bared feet can garner an emotional response, but you have to remind yourself they're not going to be cold, maybe catch a cold. Not anymore, they're already dead. And the Hitler Youth boy goes to see his parents, both of whom are dead. His mother shot in the head, his father hanged. And the doctors, about to shake hands, and one of them has both his hands completely covered in blood. And this is not even, this is blood from trying to save people. There come the others, and they're gunned down in front of them. Eat, death can wait. The military helmet looks so ill-fitting on Tauril's head. Again, suddenly it's so much closer. The danger, the death. After all, until now, she's been in an, until now, essentially safe location in the bunker. Let's go, you go. I can't anymore. I have to go. Please don't be angry with me. And they hold hands tightly, passing all the Russian soldiers, most of them young men. The war is over, and the two of them shoot themselves. And the bike makes them smile, and they bike out of there. Again, one of the only scenes of relief in the whole, and it's so, this is again, the movie could easily just have ended on them riding the bike just briefly away from, but no, instead, where they're riding the bike, we basically see no signs. They're gone. They're past. They don't see the war, the ruins anymore. And we end on the real Taurillon. One day I passed the Sophie Scholl Memorial. She was my age. She was executed the year I came to Hitler. My age was no excuse. On characters, or sorry, characters. Corinna Harfouch stated that she nearly broke down when filming the scene in which Magda Goebbels gives her children the medicine to put them to sleep before poisoning them. Bruno Ganz felt similarly when he held the girl playing one of Goebbels' children in his lap as they sang, because he knew that these children were soon to be murdered by their parents. And that's it. I was going to read, there are a lot of quotes on IMDb from the movie, and it's obviously, it's not equivalent to watching the scenes, but it is still, it's still really strong. And again, I urge you, go, obviously watch the movie. I hope if you watch this far, you have or will watch the movie, and read the quotes. You don't necessarily want to read the quotes immediately after watching the movie since you just watched it, but also read them definitely. And I really, I think it's incredibly important for movies like this to be made, and I hope this video will help get more people to watch. Even if you already watched, go rewatch it. It's an incredible piece of cinema, and it was also a movie I needed to talk about. And I'm glad that I made this video, but I'm also kind of relieved that I now have made the video, that I don't need to think so intensely about the movie, and I don't. Again, I'm not. This is a first world problem. I'm not. Nobody made me do this. This was something I chose to do of my own accord, and I didn't. I don't regret the decision, but I am still. It's unreal the awful things that Hitler did and had done, and the yes. I briefly before I. The one thing that we don't like see at all really is the concentration camps and the extermination of Jews. It's mentioned in text there at the very end, but it is the only thing, and it would have been impossible. The movie would not have it wouldn't have worked at all to genuinely show even like photographs from concentration camps. It would not have there would have been no good way to work it in. And I think it is also, that is the one thing, the one awful thing about Hitler that from his time that did not go that wasn't shown at all in this movie. And I do also think that thankfully there are a lot of movies about the concentration camps, and I don't think, again, it's been some years since I took history classes, but the I don't know for sure, but hopefully it is still something that isn't that is mentioned, and where the weight of it is touched upon in history class. The Holocaust is something that should never be forgotten. And it's been a while since I watched it, but I would just briefly say that the pianist, Roman Polanski's movie, is an amazing movie about the horrors, the treatment of Jews, and the terror they felt during. And that's, again, if that movie hadn't been made, I would maybe feel, as since it has been made, I realize that the Holocaust isn't, the only mention of it, yeah, basically the only real, you have you have Hitler literally and calmly, so calmly, explaining that, if apes kill those who are not strong enough to keep up, then obviously humans should do the same. And if yeah, I believe he even says this over dinner, as if it's the most natural and least controversial thing ever said. That is, I don't understand the reviewers who make it sound as if the movie is basically not controversial, as if it doesn't highlight how awful Hitler is. I honestly, I think they maybe have been a little too, they've focused so much on the media that turn him into basically just a beast, not at all a human being, because I don't understand how you can hear him say those things and then still say that he's not enough of a monster, that he's too human. I can't, I don't, no one who says things like that and has things like that. He didn't say it theoretically. He wasn't talking about one day I'd like to. He says this after the death of millions. Millions of Jews and millions of other minorities. And but the Holocaust is one thing that the movie really does not do a lot. Yeah, it doesn't bring it up very much, you know, and really that really is the only major thing that Hitler. I mean, the many military blunders are mentioned, you know, and yeah, the yeah, the Holocaust is the only, and it wouldn't have fit, and the Holocaust also has made, you know, a movie like The Pianist is highly dramatic, and you know, and there are a lot of these movies where the Nazis are basically made inhuman, and at that point, when you're literally exterminating, when you're committing genocide, it is, you know, at that point, it's impossible to look at someone who murders innocent people like that and just and still think that they're somehow human. But yeah, I'm incredibly, it's incredibly important that both for both of these movies, and yes, I hope this has been cathartic and compelling for you as it was for me.